this is one way of looking at artificial pancreas technologies, right? When we think about the smartphone that we have right now, it didn't begin as the iPhone, right, or an Android. It began as, for those of us who are old as me, this sort of cell phone that you put in a bag and threw over your shoulder and lugged out to the car. It was sort of portable. And they evolved and became what we now think of as smartphones. Same thing with artificial pancreas technologies. And this really speaks to what we think of as first generation, second generation, third generation systems and what they might look like. One very simple, straightforward step is one that Medtronic, the company whose building I'm standing in right now, has already helped to start to bring to market, which is a low glucose suspend, that we could have a predictive low glucose suspend. So there's multiple steps forward as we look at these technologies, and that's what this slide sort of tries to get at. What is an artificial pancreas, right? So the simplest way to describe this is it's three things, right? One, it's really simple to talk about because I'm standing in Medtronic's headquarters, right? So it's an insulin pump, right? How many people in this room are using insulin pumps? Lots of pump users. And hopefully in Sioux Falls and in Rochester, we've had some people raise their hands as well. So it's an insulin pump. It's also a continuous glucose sensor, which in this case, this is not a Medtronic product. This is Dexcom product. I'm wearing a continuous glucose sensor. I just pushed a button and see that I am at 121 approximately, and I'm steady. I had some dinner here before, so I'm doing pretty good for a post-dinner excursion. That's just perfect. We like that. So, and notice I didn't have to prick my finger in order to see what this was, right? I was able to push a button. This is continuous feed of information. This is equivalent of pricking my finger 300 times a day, only I don't have to, right? And it sits on this little device. It sits here in my pocket. When I'm going low, it lets me know, it alerts me. When I'm going high, it alerts me, right? So that I can start to have sort of what I think of as a coach in my pocket that's helping me do a better job of managing my diabetes. So that's the second part, right? So an insulin pump, a continuous glucose sensor, and then the third thing was control programs. It was an algorithms, computer programs that would take the real-time feed from a sensor that told us where blood sugar was or where it was going, interpret it, and then feed it to the insulin pump so that you could make decisions and give insulin and help to start automating the delivery of insulin. So in the old days, and you're going to see some pictures of this, old days meaning just like 5 years ago, actually 3 years ago, all of those computer programs lived on a laptop computer. Now they are on a smartphone. So this is the artificial pancreas on a cell phone, an Android cell phone. It is running in simulation mode right now, so I can pass it around and you guys could play with it, and you couldn't hurt me yet. You probably could if you dropped it, because this is a lot of money in this investment here, right? There's a lot of research, a lot of hard work has gone into this, and I'll get to share this after we're done. I'll be happy to show people and let you all look at it. But the point being that this now lives on a smartphone. This is basically a pocket computer. So I'm going to put it away for just a sec. But the artificial pancreas then is three things: a sensor, a pump, and a computer, right? That's the essence of what an artificial pancreas technology looks like right now. There's going to be other elements to that, and we're going to touch on those in a minute. So why is an artificial pancreas important? You know, I'm going to really tell you some really cool things here in a minute, but for a minute, we're also going to just take a little bit of a refresher on why is this a good idea. So because we now have continuous glucose sensing technology, we can put it onto lots of people. And we even know that people who wear CGM regularly tend to have better controlled blood sugars. And even so, looking at them, we see that they spend 41% of their day either too high or too low, right? Some of that is way too high, scary high. And like 3% of those low time is scary low, way too low. Places where emergency room visits and glucagon shots have to be given, right? And hospitalizations, DKA. Long-term, this is where complications come from, right? So why do we want to try to do better? Because we need to shrink that time out of range. And I really want you to hold on to that idea of shrinking time out of range, because you're going to get to see it very dramatically here in a minute. Another thing to look at in terms of that, so right, we're not spending enough time in range means we're not reaching the recommended hemoglobin A1C that we're supposed to have. So this is data from the T1D exchange, which is a new exchange, has about 25,000 plus minus active participants in it, type 1s, who are reporting their information, and it's also going through their clinical centers. These are the best clinical centers in the country. So it could be argued that these are people who should be doing pretty well at managing their diabetes. And if you look at that age group from 13 on up to 65, you're lucky if you have 1/3 of any age group actually reaching their their A1C target. And frankly, that's just not acceptable, right? While we're waiting for all the fantastic progress that Julia and Pat are talking about, while we're waiting for that avalanche to get fully underway that they've begun, we need to be living better lives. We need to be living with A1Cs that are in target and in range so that we can avoid all those complications that are going on. So again, this is some of the reasons why artificial pancreas technology is so important and why we feel it can have a big impact on people's lives. So, a little bit of a stroll down history, right? 2007, actually this is 2008. I was looking at this and realized this is a 2008 picture. So JDRF launched the Artificial Pancreas Project in 2006. Very, very modest investment with 16 members of a worldwide consortium of researchers. Strategic $4 million type of investment at that time. And the question really was, could we come up with computer programs that would take that feed from a sensor and give it to a pump and start to automate the next 45 minutes of my life? And I can tell you that in 2006, 2005, I was at the Worldwide Symposium for Artificial Pancreas Technologies, and it was being hotly debated. There were clinicians, in particular endocrinologists, any endos in the room, I love you all, but the endos were like, no way, there's just no way, this is too complex. You've got a 3-year-old and you've got an 85-year-old. You've got a person who's got the flu and you have somebody playing soccer. This is just way too dynamic, and you're not going to be able to automate those 45 minutes. And on the other side, you had a lot of systems engineers, any engineers in the room, because I love engineers. A lot of engineers in the room, and they were saying, you know what? This is just a complex control system, and we do these sorts of things all the time. And there was one brilliant mathematician, his name is Boris Kovachev, I have a picture of him coming up, who said, if we can tell you that a low-pressure system is going to spin off the coast of Africa and track across the Atlantic Ocean, become a Category 5 hurricane, and land within 200 miles of this spot, we can probably figure out how to automate 45 minutes of your day. So it was a really interesting time. Now, I just went to the next one of those worldwide symposiums. It was at the NIH at the beginning of this month. And I can tell you there's no debate anymore, because now everybody is doing what was done at University of Virginia and what I just experienced. There's no longer any debate about whether this is possible. Now it's just a question of how fast can we get these kinds of systems into all of our hands. There's a lot of work left to be done. So in 2007, though, that was still yet to be determined. So this is me at the University of Virginia in the hospital being a guinea pig. You can see that I have a fanny pack there, lots of wires attached to me, right? Those wires were attached literally to the sensors that were then feeding back into the laptop computers. There were 2 laptops in case one crashed. They wanted to have a backup one. You had to wear 2 sensors in case one failed, that have the other one ready to go. It was a lot of stuff on your body. And you really couldn't leave the hospital bed. Now, I was in for 24 hours, and I just got to eat and live, and the system took over and managed me beautifully. It did a fantastic job. But I didn't get to leave the hospital bed, right? I was truly a guinea pig. This is a safety trial, and safety is what we really emphasize in these trials at any time, but particularly at the very beginning, right? We need to know we're not going to hurt somebody. If you give a person too much insulin, you can kill them. So we need to know these systems are safe. So that's really what was being looked at. And, oh, by the way, having all those wires, when I needed to go down and use the restroom, I had to bring all the technicians with me. It was less than a lot of fun. So that's what it looked like in 2007. But even in 2007, when I first started using the system, it did some amazing things. So between 9:30 and 8 p.m., it kept me between 80 and 110, and basically pegged me through the night and kept me right where it was supposed to be. This is the very first generation system. It used 48% less insulin in the overnight. It shut off my basal insulin in the overnight for 4 hours, and that was how it partly kept me perfectly steady. That was something that I looked at my endocrinologist and I said, how come you've never suggested I turn off my basal for 4 hours? And she said, I would never tell you to do that. is not what we're supposed to think you're doing. But this speaks to another point that Pat Killian was making, that even those adults with type 1 for any period of time, we still have some beta cells left. So I have enough, not many, not even enough to hit the dawn, take care of the dawn phenomenon, but I have a few beta cells left that can make a little bit of insulin and keep me steady if I'm already steady, and the system gets me to a place where I'm already steady. It's fascinating to sit there and realize that. I had 6 lows in a 24-hour period when I was in the hospital running the show, right? So each time I go in to do these trials, one time I'm in and I'm having to run the show. Everything is attached to me, but it's not turned on and actively running. I'm in there, they give me my dinner, they give me my breakfast, they give me my lunch. I have to eat, I have to make my own bolus decisions. The next time I come in, I have to eat all those same meals at the exact same time so that we can see how the artificial pancreas system does. In the 24 hours when I ran it the first time, I was not very proud of this. I went low 6 times. I basically over-bolused. And about 10:30 at night, I started to ping pong, which many of us have experienced. In fact, I'm sure all of us have experienced. When the artificial pancreas took over, only 1 low. That was a pretty dramatic change right there. I had 1 high, the system had 1 high, and they were about 20 points apart. So very comparable control on the upside. This is first generation stuff, very first time that we're doing this. Time out of range. When I was running the show, and I'm a tightly controlled type 1, I spent more than 4 hours out of range. When the system came on and did what it was supposed to do, I spent less than 1 hour out of range, right? This is the power of automation. This is what machines do well for us. They can stay awake 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, right? They're not having surprise birthday parties or retirement parties or whatever, right? They're just doing what they're supposed to do. And this is what's so powerful about this. So by 2009, we had gotten a little bit further. And yes, this is me. And for a long time, they used to say I couldn't show the picture of me with the mask on because they said I would freak people out. I'm a guinea pig, right? I'm a guinea pig. All they care about is my body, that it's there doing what they needed to do. So you see that I've got EKG on, I've got a heart rate monitor on. The gas mask for when I was on the exercise bike was to measure the CO2 release and the O2 uptake. They had IVs in each arm. They were measuring not only my blood glucose in a YSI value, which is sort of the gold standard measurement of blood glucose, but they were also measuring my epinephrine and other things to see what my body was doing, how it was reacting. Right? So now this time, I'm a little bit more mobile. Everything has gone wireless, and it's feeding up into a wireless network back to laptops. So I still have a few wires. I still have the little fanny pack, but I can actually walk down a hall. I could go to the bathroom by myself. That was kind of nice. And I could get on an exercise bike for 30 minutes. It's a whole other story to tell you how much better it did than I did. What I will say, when I was on the exercise bike and I was running the show, 4 minutes after I was on the bike, they started having to feed me glucose tabs. Okay? When I got on it, there was a system you had to be on the bike for at least 30 minutes. It made it to the 27th minute before it just nicked of the low point. I was like, wait, we can make it to the 30 minutes. And they were like, no, FDA protocol, you got to eat the glucose tab. So again, really, really impressive, but also still clunky, still really hard to work with, right? Still not something that I could say I would easily have been able to take outside. You know, I kept thinking in my mind, like, what are they going to do? Have a really big wireless network and somehow feed this? You know, how am I going to get outside? So remember that when I first did this, 2007, 2008, the iPhone didn't exist, right? So I couldn't conceive of it, but some really smart engineers could. And that's the wonderful people I talk about, the big guys who start the avalanche so that as guinea pigs can be in it. So that's what led then to the development of this. This is just an Android smartphone. It's a Galaxy. It's got a really simple user interface. I'll use the picture that's up on the screen, right? So it's got 2 stoplights. One's low blood sugar, one's high blood sugar. Now, guinea pigs do get to have opinions, and I did get to give some feedback based on taking this out and showing it to people like you. It says on there, hypo and hyper. And the first time I handed it to a 17-year-old, and he was like, okay, no, so what's hypo? And I realized I needed to talk to the researchers and say, you know what, I think we should change that to low and high. So there are some things that guinea pigs can help to feed back, and those are the kinds of things that they are, in fact, building into the system now. But so low and high blood sugar, 2 stoplights. If you've got green lights, it's saying, you know what, everything looked good. You know, next 30 to 45 minutes, it's predicting that you're not going to go high, you're not going to go low. Everything is fine. It's doing what it's supposed to do. If it goes to yellow, it's saying sometime in the next 30 to 45 minutes, chances are you're going to go high or low, right? So whichever one goes yellow. And right now you can actually see that this system, it's running the simulation. As I said, I'm at 113 in the simulation and dropping. And it's got a yellow light because it's worried that in the next 30 minutes I'm going to go low, right? And in fact, I've been through this before. I can tell you I do. So it's very simple user interface, very intuitive to look at, immediately understandable to just about everybody that I've ever shown it to. In the middle, you see there's some touch buttons. You can see the meal, so you can dial up a bolus and tell it that you're going to have a meal. You see there's a red button there that says not exercise or exercise. You can turn on exercise module. Basically, when you're dialing up a meal or you're dialing up exercise, what you're really telling the engineers have a great way of saying this. They said, we need to know if you're perturbing the system. Is this a perturbation to the system? I was like, wow, that's great. Basically, am I doing something that's going to dramatically change the next couple hours, right? And cue up the system to get the optimal performance from it. So I am definitely still in the loop, right? This is technology I'm wearing, and this is material, you know, I'm still helping to make decisions. I don't necessarily have to, but if I want to get the best performance from the system, I'm really meant to be part of this. Another way of saying this is I flew in a jet today from Atlanta here to Minneapolis. It was great. Autopilot can get the jet from once it's in the air from Atlanta to Minneapolis. But to take off and land, having a pilot there is really, really helpful, right? And so same thing with this. Having us, the pilot, involved in making decisions, helping to make the system work well is going to be really helpful. So lots of things I can tell you about now. I have to see if this is go frontwards and backwards. Yeah, okay. So there's tons of things that start to happen. And the next slide is where I get to start to really have some fun. But this is Boris Kovetchev. He's a mathematician. He's an amazing individual, incredible sense of humor. He's from Bulgaria. His name is Boris. And he's got this great, great approach, which is, you know, anytime somebody tells him it can't be done, he pretty much views that as having someone thrown down a gauntlet, right? His response is, I have to figure out a way to make that happen. And so he's the kind of person that we want working on the kinds of problems that we have with type 1 diabetes. So this is Boris and me back last November, standing out on the front porch of the house that I got to live in for 3 days and 2 nights while I was on the artificial pancreas. That system up on my arm there in an armband, that's it. That's the smartphone. And the engineers had it in an armband because they didn't want to have to be, you know, which pocket is it in if they had to look at it. So they kept it in an armband so they could walk up and look at it. And that, at this point, is basically running my life. And so here's another amazing thing when we go to cell phones, right? Cell phones link back into 3G networks and 4G networks and wireless networks. So you see that computer screen on the right, that's me. That's me and another patient, actually. There were 2 of us at the same time. Through the 3G network, this entire screen that you see right here is reporting back up and being linked into a URL, and anybody, a mom, a dad, a researcher, can literally pull it up and look at it. We were walking around downtown Charlottesville, Virginia, and they had their iPads, and they were looking at me, and they're saying, by the way, you're going to go low. Are you watching this? So you really start to realize how powerful this is. There's a lot more. When you go to the cell phone integration, you had a whole new ability to monitor. You know, as one of the researchers said, if your car can dial 911 when you've been in an accident, why can't your artificial pancreas, right? If you've gone to a scary low place, emergency responders should be able to be deployed directly to where you are. This is what starts to be possible when you start to look at these kinds of smart systems. So let's get to some fun. Very first night, I'm on the system. And it takes a while. There's sort of a war room, and they're putting things on you, and everybody's poking you and prodding you, and is it all working? And yes, the whole thing is copacetic. Okay, great. I said, I'm hungry. I want to go out. And they're like, okay, we've got you, right? Because they're literally watching me. I have to say, that actually took my breath away. I almost got emotional at that moment because they were all looking at their iPhones or their iPads or their computers, and they said, we've got you. You're good to go. Right? That's not something most type 1s get to hear every day. I don't sort of have a guardian angel looking over me all the time, but I felt like I had one all of a sudden, and it was a really lovely thing to have. So I immediately walked out the door and went and found a Five Guys cheeseburger joint. It was just the first place I found, but I thought, this is perfect. And I went in and I got a Five Guys cheeseburger and some French fries. Now, I don't know, do you guys have Five Guys cheeseburgers here? Okay. It's a Virginia company. I'm never sure if it's got a full exposure. So I can't tell you the last time I had a cheeseburger and fries. And I have to be honest with you and tell you I did not eat all of those fries. I just couldn't do that to my body. I just was sure that I was going to go to 300 or 400 or something was going to go nuts. But I ate a cheeseburger and some fries. I dialed up 1.98 units of insulin for that meal, right? As we all know, there's no way that's enough insulin. It was a very conservative bolus. I didn't do anything else for the rest of the evening. I never went above 195. The system came on, and it did exactly what it was supposed to do. It gave little micro boluses of extra insulin all through the evening till it got me back where it wanted me. And once it had it where it wanted me, it just kept me there, right? The second night I went out, I had duck and mashed potatoes and cauliflower and a hot fudge sundae. I never went over 165. Bolused in a comparable amount. So I was definitely sort of under pitching this to see how the system would do. It was fascinating, of course, to watch. I got to run around all day. I took an hour-and-a-half walk, and there was an ice skating rink. I wanted to go ice skating, but they wouldn't let me because they kept saying, do you know what happens if you fall with that? So I basically got to live a normal life on an artificial pancreas system for 3 days and 2 nights. This system took over and ran me. So another great thing, and I usually use questions to help me pull some of these points out, but think about it. That first night, it's kept giving me extra insulin to get me back down to where it wanted me. This is controlled to range. It's not trying to manage me to a super tight number. It's trying to keep me within a broad range. So say 200 and 180, or 80, or 180 and 80, or 270, whatever it would be, right? It's trying to keep you within that range, and did a great job of doing that. Goal for overnight then, of course, is to keep you in that range and just to kind of get you sort of pegged. So that first night, it's giving me extra insulin right up till 11 o'clock, 11:15, and I'm thinking, you know what, I'm going to wake up in the middle of the night low, because if I give myself extra insulin as I'm getting ready to be going to bed, I will almost always go low. So I'm looking at my endocrinologist, and her name is Stacy Anderson, and I said, we're going to see each other in the middle of the night, because she's staying in the same house, and she would have had to get up to look after me if the system alarmed. And she said, well, let's just wait and see. And sure enough, next thing I know, it was 7:30 in the morning, and everything was perfect, right? Got me to 100, kept me there through the whole night. Second night, did the exact same thing. Brings you down, hits you, runs right through the night. Hit the dawn phenomenon, did everything it was supposed to do, right? This is really powerful stuff. Remember I was talking about that time in range? This is what brings us to time in range. How many people in this room, and please feel free to raise your hands in Sioux Falls and Rochester, have kids and you would love to know that every night they were going to have perfect control, right? How many of us are adults and would love to have perfect control, right? This is something we all need, and that's what this is really focused at. Again, normally I would ask questions, but I think we're going to wait till we get to the end for those. So where are we going next? And I've got a couple of slides, and again, obviously I could talk about what specifically was going on in this trial till the cows come home, and have been known to do so, so be careful. But let's think a little bit about what comes next. So this is just as I showed you that those 6 or multiple steps, first generation, second generation, third generation systems. This system is what we would call a second generation system. This is control to range. It's going to not only attenuate insulin on the downside, it's going to give you extra insulin on the upside, right? It's much more active control, though you're still involved. So it's somewhere around number 4 in our sort of product step map that we have there. But we see beyond that. JDRF is looking beyond that, because these systems, while this is good and good enough, is good enough. I always, better is the enemy of good enough. This is good enough. It can get better, but this is good enough right now. If I could just get perfect control every single night, that would be good enough for me, right? Just for the beginning to start with. But what else do we need then to get beyond just good? To get to better, JDRF wants to see better sensors. So I have the little picture of Tic Tacs up there because I have actually gotten to wear new sensors that use fiber optic technology that ultimately should be about the size somewhere between a chiclet and a Tic Tac. I got to do those in a clinical trial. I can tell you all about that sort of off in the parking lot here, but amazing. That's another generation of technology. They calibrated 10 minutes after they were in, they calibrated. I looked at the engineers who were working on it and I said, so how long have you gotten this to work in people? And they said, well, we don't know, you're the first person. But in pigs, we got it to run for 60 days. So these are pretty amazing things, and I can't wait to get to see those. That's with our partnership with Becton Dickinson. It's a great company. I love these little stories because it helps to humanize so much of what we do. Last September, the executive leadership from Becton Dickinson came to JDRF's executive leadership for our international board, volunteers just like all you all. And I am from Virginia, all you all. So from our international board, was together in New York City, and they came to give an update on where they were with the partnership that we have with them. And all of their executive leadership came in with dark blue hair, which is JDRF's color. And they had done that as a fundraiser amongst their executive leadership team to present JDRF with support, with a check, right? None of what we've been talking about here is cheap. It costs a lot of money when you start putting things onto people. And BD, I just thought that was an amazing thing. Here's one of our industry partners who's in business, and yet they dyed their hair blue, came to downtown Manhattan, and did a presentation to our board as well as present a check. It gives you a sense of what this community is like that we're all part of, and that everybody is interested in seeing better outcomes here. So Tic Tacs. Another one is also with BD is microneedles. So you see the picture of the penny, and you see the little blowout from the penny. There's a little needle next to the E of E pluribus unum above the Lincoln Memorial. If you want to see how small that is, particularly for those of us who are over 50, get out a penny and look at the E on E pluribus unum on the back of a US penny. It's incredibly small, but this is a new kind of needle that, and I actually got to see some of the data on this, that can help to get insulin on board very fast. Instead of infusing it into the subcutaneous fat layer, it pushes it in at the surface of the skin where there's a lot more blood flow, so that you can see uptake that's, instead of saying taking 45 minutes, takes 15 to 20 minutes. So really amazing things. These are the kinds of things that JDRF is investing in. This is just a very small sampling of the things that we're continuing to invest in to drive second, third, fourth generation, a robust marketplace of new technologies that improve our lives. So you heard Julia speak earlier about less until none. These are the kinds of technologies, these are the kinds of systems that reduce the daily burden of living with type 1, reduce the complexity of it, reduce the dangers of it, and improve the quality of our lives. We also are looking at multi-hormone pumps, glucagon, amylin. Amazing things I could tell you about that too. I'm going to try to stay on time here and go, I think, to Q&A.
So let's start. We'll go backwards this time. So let's start with the people out in the overflow room and see if they have any questions for Tom and or Julia and Pat. They can always join back up on the stage if we need them to. So
all right.
Thank
we got
you,
one
Tom.
Starting.
Yep, go ahead.
First of all, thank you for being the guinea pig for so many people that are really excited about this. You described the control system, and I think most of us understand how that works. A sensor, a delivery mechanism, and then a computer to run the whole thing. Here's my question. I just happened to retire as the CEO of the largest sensor company in the world for industrial sensors. And my daughter has diabetes. So we have developed the best industrial sensors in the world for factory automation and logistics automation. What will it take to finally get away from poking children and people and get a sensor that really is embedded like a pacemaker inside the body of a human person that provides really good readings? Because that's such an important element of this whole crisis and this disease. So where are we on that, and what's the hope to move forward quickly on this?
So the question then fundamentally is, what does the future look like for getting an implanted sensor so we wouldn't have to be really ever pricking ourselves or applying something to our body. Like I have a sensor on right here in the back of my arm, and it has a little, sensor the size of a human hair implanted inside my arm. And the answer is we are conducting research, and there's a lot of different companies and groups looking at this right now. The body is a complex place, and there's this one particular thing called biofouling, where the body tends to deposit things around things it doesn't like. That's just a very most simplistic way of describing it. There's a lot of challenges. The implanted sensor is kind of a holy grail of where we want to get to. I can tell you that I was just looking at one last Thursday and Friday that's about the size of, I don't know what to describe it. It's a little teeny capsule about yay big that is in fact subdermally implanted inside the body and would seem to last for quite a period of time. So that work is being done. It's active. They are in human trials with some of those, but I can't tell you how long it's going to take. We're going to have to continue to invest in those. There are real obstacles to it. I think external sensing, like we see with Dexcom or Medtronics or others, is obviously on market already, is going to be the stuff that we're able to use to begin with, and we're just going to have to, just like with iPhone technology, it's going to get better and better as time goes by, but it's got a ways to go.
Other questions out there, Ross?
Yes. Yeah, hold on.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Katie, and I've had type 1 diabetes for 17 years, and it's just beyond exciting to hear your story. My first meal is going to be an entire box of Kraft macaroni and cheese and an entire carrot cake. So my question is, I also read about an artificial pancreas study, I think happening in Boston,
Yes.
where the young woman wore it for 5 days.
Yes.
Is JDRF participating in that, or is that just a simultaneous study?
So that's the Beacon Hill study, and that's happening in Boston, and that's research that's being run by Ed Damiano. Ed Damiano is one of JDRF's members of JDRF's consortium, Artificial Pancreas Consortium. In fact, I just sat next to him at dinner last Thursday night. And the Beacon Hill study is amazing, and that's one that's using two pumps. One that so you're wearing two pumps at once, and it's got glucagon and insulin. And it's a system that actually can bring you up as well as push you down, right? So it's all part of JDRF's master plan. That is primarily right now being funded through an NIH piece that JDRF helped to influence and drive forward, but he's part of our research consortium. So hopefully that answered. So that is part of us, is I guess how I would say it. And it's amazing work, and I also will say, I'm not sure what my first giant meal will be. It might be pizza, but I was with somebody in Philadelphia, and they said, this would be the best Band-Aid ever. And I thought that was a great way to describe it, right? It's not the cure, but it's a really nice Band-Aid to help us do better while we have to live with this.
We've got another one, but this is for the two researchers in Sioux Falls.
Okay.
Okay. I was just wondering what kind of research is done. I have an identical twin sister who is type 1 diabetic, and in its adult onset, she got it when she was 36. And then I happen to also have a son who's just diagnosed, and well, he's 14 or 13 at the time when he got diagnosed. I guess my question would be, what kind of research is there, is there anything that I can donate as far as like a match or, for my beta cells or anything for my twin sister?
Julia?
So there are studies for close relatives with type 1 diabetes, some of these environmental trigger studies and TrialNet, where individuals who have close relatives can participate in those studies. In terms of donation to an identical twin, the issue is that your sister still has an autoimmune response, so even though your beta cells wouldn't be rejected as foreign tissue, they would be rejected by the autoimmune response, and that's why we're trying to develop vaccine technology that could stop that autoimmune response. It's also very difficult. The pancreas is not an organ that likes to be sectioned, and so it's not one of our primary approaches to try to use identical twins or family donation to solve this problem. It's why we think it's really important to have a scalable cell source that will be available for everyone.
Okay, so let's move into this room and then we'll go to Sioux Falls. I'm sorry, lights in my eyes. Angie, I think I laid down the microphone somewhere.
We've got a question up over there. If you just want to stand up, and we got
if
a
you
lot of
stand up
questions.
and I'll repeat.
I'll repeat it, Jackie.
What is the glucose sensor actually measuring? Is it actually measured? Is it in a blood vessel and measuring the blood glucose, or is it lymph or
So it's measuring interstitial fluid. So it's actually, and then it's working. It has its own algorithm that then attempts to. It's calibrated against a finger stick, which finger stick is actually not all that accurate, and then it tries to interpolate and give you a good sense of where your blood sugar actually is and where it's trending. And it's the trend that ultimately becomes really, really important. Are you steady? Are you rising? Are you falling, right? So I was at 121. Now we can see where I am now. And I'm at 103, and I'm trending slightly downward, right? So it's the trend that you really start to manage to in these control systems. But right now it's interstitial. There are other, like I said, the one that's implanted is actually, well, no, that's also interstitial. So that, you know, there's different ones. There's different approaches, but right now mostly interstitial fluid.
Julie, do you want to go ahead?
How long before you anticipate the system that you use will be available for all of us to have?
So how long until we all have this, right? So I was ready for it yesterday. We all were ready for it yesterday. This is work that JDRF is trying to undertake. So you saw that roadmap that I showed earlier where we see very simple systems like the Veo that Medtronic has that's a low glucose suspend, and then you see a next step which is a predictive low glucose suspend, right? And then you see a predictive system that can come on the high and the low side, and then you get to the control to range. Each one is going to step along to us. Veo already exists. The predictive low glucose suspend technology, that already exists and is being tested in humans, and there's a path forward there towards commercialization. So these are going to reach us in stages. The system I'm using right now, it's further out, right? And I'm really glad that you asked that question because it really lets me talk about what's next with the system. So mine is sort of a second generation system, a little bit more sophisticated, control to range. What's next from JDRF's research perspective, from our international consortium perspective? We want to go big. I'd say it's the go big, right? This is our go big effort. Now we want to put this system on a couple hundred people and send them home for 6 months, right? That's a kind of a phase 2 trial. There's a very well-defined structure in how you move things through clinical trials. This is a pivotal trial. It's very important that we do it. It generates all the data for the FDA, data for the insurance industry, data for industry that brings these products to market. So they can conclusively demonstrate that this does all that we wanted to do, even when I go canoeing and tip over the canoe, right? We'll have to see what it all looks like. But that's a big step. We want to see that trial up and running within the next, say, year. But that's a $10 million lift, as they say. It's a $10 million project. So if you ever wonder why it is that you go to walks at Mall of America or you go to amazing galas here in Minnedokotas or in any chapter across this country, or you go on bike rides to raise money for JDRF, it's because that's what we need in order to continue both this work and the work that you're hearing Julia and Pat talk about.
Carol, do you want to go, and then we'll go to the other side of the room? Yeah.
2 questions. Have you gotten any money from Alfred Mann, who's working on inhaled insulin, who has billions of dollars?
Yes.
And also, if you had given yourself a bolus normally for the cheeseburger and fries and hot fudge sundae, how many units would you have just thought you should have had?
I would have given myself, let me answer this reverse because the last one's easier. I would have given myself 7 units, I've decided, frankly. And in the end, the system ended up giving me about 5.85 in total. So it did better than I probably would have. I probably would have ended up going low later in the night. But on the Al Mann question, so Alfred Mann is an individual. He was involved in insulin pumps and a very, very interesting character. Lives out in California. It's where I'm going after I leave here. And we do work with Al Mann, but we haven't And Al has supported our chapters, but so he's involved, but not. And so his new kind of insulin is something that we're actually looking at, and maybe it's worth taking a moment. So he's looking at a kind of insulin that's inhaled, not like the kind that Pfizer once brought out with their big giant thing. This is a little thing, and you sort of do a quick little puff of insulin that gives you this very rapid onset that would help us with those initial spikes after we start to eat a meal. And that could really help out an artificial pancreas system. So it is all being looked at. This is all part of the big mix. Like I said, there's so many pieces going on here.
Hi, my name is Virginia. My son is 12, and he was just recently diagnosed over Labor Day weekend with type 1 diabetes. He was 11 when he was diagnosed, so we're really new at this right now. And I was wondering about what you had said about the finger stick being not as accurate as compared to what?
So
I guess.
So there's a lot of variability in glucometers, right? So in fact, if you want to have some fun, you can take the exact same drop of blood and take 2 strips, put them in the same glucometer, and just measure the exact same drop of blood, and you'll get 2 different numbers.
Okay.
And sometimes remarkably different numbers. Sometimes when I get a number that I don't feel like the sensor, I feel like the sensor's probably pretty much on target, but maybe I've got a little lemon juice or sugar on my fingers and I didn't know it. I ate an apple or something. I'll remember to wash your hands before you test your fingers. But I'll do another test just to see. So glucometers are not super duper accurate compared with like blood drawn out of a vein and spun down in a machine called YSI that gives you this really gold standard reading.
Yeah.
There's a surprising variance.
Okay, so
you're working, all of these things are working with getting close.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You bet.
Go ahead. No, I'm sorry. It's okay. I just said we do need to use the microphone, otherwise the other people can't hear us. So I'll bring it right back, okay? Yep.
I have had diabetes for 64 of my 74 years, and I can hardly wait to get this. I'm curious about whether you have insulin implanted in some sort of a container, or are you still connected to tubing?
No, it's a pump. It's a pump. So the question is, do I have insulin implanted inside my body, or am I still using a pump? So first thing I have to ask you, though, before I go there is 64 years. So are you in the medalist program? Good. So she's a medalist. That's an amazing program that actually Julia and Pat could certainly speak to. Is an amazing program. It's run through the Joslin Center, JDRF partners with, for people who've lived with type 1 for 50 years. And we learn a lot from people who've made it into the medalist program. You get a gold medal. It's a very celebratory thing because when she was first managing her diabetes, it was frankly the dark ages. And even 10 years ago can be the dark ages compared to some of the stuff we have now. So we really do learn a lot. And if there's other people, as you get closer, I heard somebody back there say 48 years. As you make it to 50, get into the medalist program. We learn a lot from people in that program. So the system, though, that I'm wearing right now is using a traditional insulin pump. And in this case, it was a T-Slim tandem pump and a sensor. Someday, perhaps it would be something different, right? I've actually seen some implanted pumps or some insulin depot kind of designs. But right now, we're working with technologies that we're familiar with.
Hi, thanks. I actually have 2 children with type 1 diabetes, and my daughter actually has had it the longest. My son was just diagnosed a year ago. But my daughter started using the continuous blood glucose monitor, and I'm sure a lot of people in the room have tried it. And I'm wondering about calibration. You were talking about some of that earlier, and I'm wondering with this system how often you have to calibrate with testing.
So the question is about sensor technology and how often you have to prick your finger. And we are looking at, at this very moment in this country, there's at least two companies on market with product, Medtronic and Dexcom. And Dexcom's product is in its 4th generation, and the data on it shows that it's much more tightly clustered. The Medtronic is on an earlier generation of their technology, though they have a new generation coming along. The Dexcom one that I'm wearing was twice-a-day calibration. And when I was in this trial, I was using this exact same sensor that I'm doing right now. They have a new sensor that's called the G5 that I've seen, and it reports into a cell phone. And as best I know, I'm actually going to be in their headquarters next Wednesday out in La Jolla, California. So I'll get an answer for you, but I think it's still two calibrations a day. And, you know, there's tricks to getting really good performance out of sensors. And the longer they're on, the better they tend to be. The one I have on right now is more than a week old. It's actually 10 days old. And you know, calibrating well, you've got steady readings as opposed to rapidly changing readings, things like that that can help you get better performance.
Let's do one more in here, and then we'll go to Sioux Falls. Go ahead.
You showed a slide with the multi-generational expectations for this technology. Is it possible that one day the use of the data from this technology will eliminate the A1C?
So it's a really, really good question. And we might want to talk really nerd out about that offline because everyone else may not appreciate that, but I'd love to talk to you about that. There's a huge piece of this, right? If we have continuous tracking of people's information up into a cloud, there's a whole nother level of things that starts to come to us, right? You could have companies, I can't imagine which ones, that could offer you another service. Not only are you buying their product, but you're getting a monthly service where they're telling you, you know, you're going through a growth spurt right now and your insulin to carb ratio is just shifted from this to this. Or you think your correction factor at 4 a.m. is this, but it actually is this. They're going to be able to give you a lot of information. To your point, one of the things we worked out with FDA when we got some brand, you know, we talked about advocacy and how important advocacy is. You know, cannot be understated how powerful and important advocacy is, not only in terms of us getting the big funding through for NIH, but also in the work with the FDA. And we have new guidance from the FDA. That guidance from the FDA includes time in range. So it's not just A1C that's your outcome. It's how much time do you spend in the target range? Because, you know, A1C is an average. So it could mean I spend time, lots of time way up high and lots of time way down low, and my average looks good, but it really isn't. So time in range may become actually as good or better. I can't prognosticate on that really, but it is something that's starting to be looked at, absolutely. These technologies are empowering a whole new level of knowledge and awareness that we've never had before.
So, Kara, do we have any questions in Sioux Falls? We do.
Let me get it. Hang on.
Are you still plugging your food in every day when you have the pancreas on?
So am I still plugging my food in? So like I said, this is that autopilot thing. To get optimal performance, I'm still meant to be part of the system. I'm still meant to sort of say, yes, I'm eating a meal, or yes, I'm exercising. We had a reference earlier to the study, the Beacon Hill study in Boston, and all they have to do there is just say whether the meal is low, medium, or high in carb content. That's all they have to do, because it's really just queuing up the system. It's not having to actually do all that carb counting. So in this particular trial, we also had a point where we had a snack, but we didn't tell the system, so we could see how it would do. So you're meant to be in there. It's meant that you're supposed to be there helping to make this work well. But if you were to forget, and how many adolescents forget, how many of us adults forget, right? So it would spin up and do its best to keep you in range. You might not get the optimal performance from it, but you would get a pretty darn good, you know, response from it. It's funny because as you said that, it made me think of another thing. There's another point that I want to make, and we can take some more questions from there, but there's one final point. You know, the thing about this is, right, so what I can tell you what all this amazing data and what it's like to live on it and eating a hot fudge sundae and how much I had to dial up or not dial up or touch exercise or don't. But if you really think about it, every person I know with type 1 diabetes, I go through my day trying to be invisible, right? I took 2 flights to get here. I live in the mountains of Southwest Virginia. I have a farm. And when we have the cure, I'm going to spend all my time on that farm. But I took 2 flights today. On those flights, I didn't want everybody to know around me that I had diabetes and that I was having to prick my finger to calibrate my sensor and count what I'm eating and make bolus decisions, right? I want to be invisible. We all work very, very hard at making this look easy. But the truth of the matter is, it is not easy. It's very, very hard, right? It's very easy to get emotional about this. It's a lot of work. It never stops. We never get vacations. When I was on this, it was like having a vacation. It stopped for a little while, or it was not as omnipresent. I got to live a more normal life. And that's a really powerful thing. So yes, I still dialed up my meals, but compared to what I normally have to do, it was a piece of cake. It was a lovely thing. So I'll probably wrap up there, unless you have more questions.
Kara, did you have any other questions in Sioux Falls?
We do have some. Do we have time?
We maybe have time for one more. And then, yeah, I mean, Tom will still be here, but I feel
here in
bad.
Minneapolis, I'm happy to stay and talk to people.
Yeah, well, yeah, he could just stay online and talk. But sure, go ahead.
Okay, here's the...
Okay, don't fight over who's going to ask a question.
Okay, it's a very simple question. He did convince me that it's actually working, but the question was never really answered. Why is it still in these clinical trials? Why is it not available for a broader consumer or type 1 diabetes community?
So the question is, why is it not yet available, right? So the answer is that the first generations of these systems, of the very simple low glucose suspend, are on market in Canada and in Europe and hopefully soon in the United States. The system that I'm looking at is far more sophisticated. It's not just turning off insulin, it's giving you some extra insulin, right? This is very dangerous systems. We need to know that this is going to be safe. Human clinical trials are well-defined structure by which we bring an idea, we translate an idea from the laboratory into new therapies that change our lives. And we are about halfway through that process. It's the best answer I can give you. It's not yet commercially available because we still have a lot of testing and work left to do. I've warned the system. I can tell you where the glitches are. I can tell you the places where I wish it still did some things a little bit differently. It's still not perfect. It's always going to have more work done on it. So we're well into this process, but we're not yet ready to see this be commercialized. There's a lot to do. We're going to get there. You got to have a plan. You got to stick with it, and that's what we're trying to do.
Thank you, Tom. So now our call to action. We hope you'll bear with us for a short while because we have both a celebration and a call to action. I would like to welcome Leslie Milliken from our board of directors. She's our incoming president, and she'd like to share some words with you. Thank you, Leslie. And I'm going to advance your slides.
Oh, good thing there's a... Can you hear me okay? Good thing there's a little riser back here. Tom, you almost made me cry with that guardian angel comment, so I fully appreciate everything you said. There's a quote from a child's book that's called Lily's Purple Plastic Purse that I think captures everything we heard. And it's, wow. That's all she could say was, wow. I'm always overwhelmed at the complexity and amazed at the remarkable progress and vision for the future that in the work that's represented here. So thank you. But we've been sitting a long time. It's time for the call to action. And so I have just a few very important things to say. I see some people leaving. So I'm going to talk really sort of rapidly, but hopefully clearly, because I have something important, very, very important to say to you. JDRF is a volunteer-driven organization. Volunteers play important leadership roles, and they roll up their sleeves and get the work done. There are many opportunities to volunteer through JDRF. You could be involved in planning and executing an event. Volunteers lead our outreach and government relations effort, which you heard about from Camille earlier in our discussion. And there's work to do at the office. Whatever your talents and skills are, we can put them to use at JDRF. So I want to extend a special thank you to those of you who do extend the time, energy, and effort to make all of this possible. So thank you. And for those of you who are not yet volunteers, I hope that you have heard about or find a role that you can play. There's a form in your packet that you can use to express your interest, and if you just fill that out, somebody from JDRF will contact you. Okay, let me just take a moment now to highlight some of the connections between the fundraising that's done and the important research progress that we heard about. The Walk to Cure Diabetes is our largest program. Through it, we raise the most money and draw the most constituents to our cause. There are 3 events, 2 indoor, 1 in Minneapolis at the Mall of America, 1 in Sioux Falls, and an outdoor event in Rochester, Minnesota, which is on May 19th, so you can still participate in that. I know if we were all in the same room, I'd ask how many people participate in the walk, but we're not, so we'll skip that. I know many of you participate in the walk. You raise money by writing letters and asking people to donate. To date, this year, these efforts have raised more than $1.5 million. So if you will, please join me. And tonight, we want to recognize the efforts of some folks from South Dakota who used the walk to raise some money. So what I have here are the team captains representing their family teams. My apologies for any name mispronunciation. Stephanie Bangford, Aaron and Jo Marie Bjorkman, Adam Erickson, Katie Fritz, Larissa Luther, Rob and Kim McCoy, Becky Pagone, Emily Phelps, Jenny Pumala, again, my apologies if I've misstated some of these, Bernice Verhey, Tara Wallman, and Sarah Wardner. So let's just give them a quick round of applause. What? Come up on stage. In Sioux Falls. And here too. Yeah, later this. There they are. Wow, perfect. All right, good. And we're not forgetting anyone. Later this year, we'll actually recognize the efforts of folks in the Twin Cities and Rochester. So the walk is just one opportunity to show your passion for JDRF. We've also heard from many of our constituent groups that they would like more opportunity to turn challenge events, you know what those are, those athletic endeavors where you really push yourself, into fundraising opportunities. So we've added to our portfolio, our program portfolio with the Ride to Cure Diabetes and the JDRF Run Club, where we offer training and support to organize teams. The Birkebeiner and the Mud Run, which I'm anxious to see. That sounds fun. Are fun, and organizations have chosen JDRF as their signature charity, so we're gaining momentum through those events. So, in short, JDRF is not taking finding a cure lying down, and you don't need to either. But maybe you like to get dressed up to show your support, so consider the following options. The Derby for a Cure is happening this Saturday, May 4th, in Minneapolis, and I can't remember the location. What is it?
Herkimer. The Herkimer.
Herkimer, okay. I don't know where that is, but it's sponsored by the Young Leadership Committee and open to adults 21 and older. Tickets are still available. It's an opportunity to don your fancy hat and best linen and show your support for your Derby favorite. Our 2 gala balls are Toast to Tomorrow, which occurs in Minneapolis in October, and the Sugar Ball, which is in the Fargo-Moorhead area in early 2014. These are really fun evenings, including an auction, a program, music, dancing, great fun. Information about all of these things in your packet, and I do hope you'll join us. And finally, for those who would rather not walk, run, stroll, dance, ride, run, ski, get muddy, or dressed up, there's an option for you. And it's called Rally for Research. It runs through May 15th, and it's very simple. It's a letter writing campaign accessed online where you inspire other people to give based on your story. 5 easy steps. Kara Fisher can provide more information. So, our time together comes to a close tonight. Thank you for what you have done. We hope that we've inspired you to do more. And I'm going to ask all of you to join me in this last statement, which kind of breaks me up. So I'm going to ask you to say it with me. There is a cure, and together we'll find it. You ready? There is a cure, and together we'll find it. Thank you, and good night.